The New York Liberty head to the desert with a 2-game lead. Plus, Sarah Spain takes Christine Brennan to task. All that and more on today's episode of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. Gotta get up. Gotta get up. Gotta get up. Hey, women's basketball fans. Welcome to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media and hosted by Erica L. Ayala. All right, New York Liberty fans, usually we go live, but as Brian knows, I mean, literally his first question to me was, what state are you in? My travel schedule, we wanted to make sure we got this episode in before Game 3, so we're pre-recording this, so it'll be a little bit different. But as always, Erica L. Ayala here with Brian Fleurantin. Brian, what's good in the Brooklyn neighborhood?
Pretty quiet around these parts. Like, as the weather cools, I'm thinking about how beautiful it was in Europe and like how warm it is compared to like 65 and gray. So I'm like, take me back.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, the weather is definitely changing, but we know things are definitely heating up in the WNBA semifinals. Now, we obviously are going to talk a lot about Game 2, which happened in Brooklyn. And, you know, we might get into a little bit about Game 2, Connecticut, Minnesota, because, oh, baby, it got spicy. But we definitely want to prioritize talking about New York Liberty. But you know what we do here on Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media. We're going to start with the shoot around, which is just getting us a little warmed up. And this is just some news stories throughout the WNBA. And we talked about Brian on the last episode. Misha joined us for that as well. Misha and I got to talk a lot about Teresa Weatherspoon and her firing. And I want to ask you about Teaspoon later when we talk about the Liberty game, because you know Teaspoon was in the house. But we have now another former New York Liberty guard let go, relieved of head coaching duties. Tanisha Wright, no longer the head coach of Atlanta. Now, we talked, again, Misha and I talked about this on the last episode, Brian, and we talked a lot about language because, of course, this is the third coach, Kurt Miller being the first to be relieved of duties, fired, mutually agreed to part ways, whatever the language is. All the language has been a little bit different. But that was kind of the conversation that Misha and I were having. You know, sometimes those things matter, especially for Black women. Those things matter when you're trying to go get another job. So let's talk about Tanisha Wright. What are your thoughts when you saw the news that Atlanta is going to move in a different direction?
Yeah, so I think we might have talked about it during the year. Like when the Dream made their publicly stated goal of being a top 4 seed, like they wanted home court, and you saw even before, like it felt like this year was snake bit for the franchise because JC was out to the beginning of the year. Ryan got hurt in the middle, and then they lost Shine Parker at the end. Like the final 5 that they worked with and rolled with into the postseason was good. But I think for the Dream, just everything sort of not meeting expectations for them this year. It's a situation where if somebody goes, it's always the coach. And as fortunate as fortunate as it may be, that's just how it goes sometimes. I think for the Dream, I feel for them, they have a lot of tough questions to figure out, starting with like, okay, how can we get the most out of our roster? Because there's talent there. And the question for Dan Padover and the Dream staff, Renee Montgomery and everyone else is, okay, was the coaching why we didn't hit the potential we should have? Is it our play style? Is it the type of shots we're getting? Is it our coverages? What are we doing that doesn't allow us to be in that Minnesota, Connecticut, New York tier, or even if you want to go a tier below, like a Seattle, for example? What is it that we're not doing, and how can we get there? So I feel for them, they have to sort of like figure out who on the roster is best suited to sort of get them to that next step. Because even last year, you know, I was so like, I joked a lot that I was so like frustrated with the Dream because it's like, you guys should be a lot better than what you are. And then in the Dallas series, they jump out to that huge lead in Game 1. It melts away. And then Game 2, when they lose, they're completely non-competitive. And it's like, uh-oh, that shouldn't happen. Like you guys were there in the wings, you know, no, they were healthy last year, but it's like, hey, Dallas should not be boat racing you by like 28 in like that shouldn't happen. Like that should never happen
Right.
under circumstances. So I feel
Right.
like everything sort of like came together, and it's a you want to, if you want to make that jump, better to do it now so you have an
Yeah.
entire off season expansion draft and sort of like coaching availabilities coming open to sort of figure out, okay, what are we going to be able to figure out? What are we going to get right? And who do we need to bring in to get to that next step? So
Right.
yeah, I'm really fascinated to see what they do and the internal development from their players that will be there in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, I think you brought up so many points, including what I heard you talking about was that there is a delicate balancing act. And I talk about this a lot in my NHL coverage of the Seattle team that, like you said, first person to go is the coach. Now, who makes that decision is usually, right, the front office, along with, I'm sure, ownership input. But if you are, the word that came to my mind, and I'm just going to say it because I can't think of another word right now, but if you are kind of the overseer, and you could tell why I hesitated to say that, but if you oversee
Yeah.
the coaching role, the head coaching role, who then hires all of the other coaches usually, if things ain't working, you don't want to go. So you make that decision to let the head coach go. Now, am I saying in this situation that that's necessarily the case? No, not necessarily. I think the reason you bring that up, or we bring that up now, is because if things still don't improve with a new coach, and I don't think it's adequate to just give a new coach 1 year, Chicago, you have to start asking other questions. And or if the same problems permeate, assuming you have the same roster, which you mentioned the expansion draft, they won't. But even if you did in a vacuum, right, that's still tough. So the front office is kind of giving themselves a little bit more leeway. And the reason, again, I mentioned the front office is because I do think it was probably a good decision to move on from Tanisha Wright. She'd been getting criticism. I don't think all of it was warranted, but things just weren't working out. That being said, with the exception of bringing in Tina Charles, who, from my understanding, Tanisha Wright played a big role for Tina Charles, but Tina is the reason that that team even gets to the playoffs, in my opinion. And so for me, that's one player, again, who has gone on the record. I talked to Tina about Tanisha being a big draw. And if Tina doesn't come back, then now you put there's pressure, in my opinion, on the front office. You don't have your head coach. And if Tina, for a lot of reasons, including that Tanisha Wright's not coming back, if Tina Charles doesn't come back, now there's a lot of pressure, in my opinion, on that front office on how to figure out a roster that they can get the best out of Ryan Howard when she's healthy, of course. And again, you mentioned injuries, but injuries are a part of the game. You have to be able to manipulate and manage that. You can't always use that as an excuse. Now, there are injuries that impact a team more than others, but again, it's sports. So I think it's really interesting to see what's going to happen in Atlanta, including if we'll see someone from the recent past, including maybe a Kurt Miller or Teresa Weatherspoon, come to Atlanta. Given that both of those coaches came from teams that are lottery teams effectively, I'm not sure if that's necessarily the right fit. I get the sense that that's probably not where Kurt Miller, not Atlanta specifically, but I would argue that Kurt Miller probably wants a chance to really make a strong push to a top four. So I don't see him necessarily doing that. And I don't know where Teaspoon is. But again, we'll talk about her a little bit later. Unfortunately, Brian, another thing on our shoot around, it relates to injuries. And shout out to Roberta Rodriguez, who I'm back. Yeah, sometimes when I swipe on the trackpad, it like swipes me all the way out, which is annoying. But we can edit that out. Anyway, so unfortunately, in the shoot around, Brian, we have to once again talk about injuries. Shout out to our very own Roberta Rodriguez, who is keeping eyes on international basketball. There was, a women's championship game today. Gabby Williams and Nika Mule were there. And of course, Roberta is our co-host of Tempestade Talk. Tempestade is the Portuguese word for storm. So, of course, she's keeping eyes on the Seattle Storm players. Now, Gabby Williams, great performance, but unfortunately, Nika Mule, who did not see a lot of time in the WNBA, was very thoughtful in how she talked about her minutes and what she learned, was playing really well and got an injury, seemed like lower body. I don't want to speculate, but lower body for sure. And unfortunately, there is a video surfacing. We're not going to share it on Black Rosie Media platforms, but there is a video, and there's only one other time I've heard an athlete just their screams so loud in a stadium, in an arena, where you definitely felt that the player was very concerned and in a lot of pain. And unfortunately, that is what we see from Nika. She was taken off the court on a stretcher, eventually came back to the bench. We don't know what happened exactly. We'll wait for Nika at the time of this recording. But just a tough blow to, again, a rookie who learned a lot but did not get a lot of playing time.
Yeah, whenever serious injuries like that, you just hope that the player is okay, first and foremost. Like, that's the thing that matters most. You hope that they're okay. You hope that they have like friends and support systems they can lean on in case things go really bad, and they have that support to keep them uplifted and sort of like supported and cared on during a process like this. So I hope that she's okay, especially for young players at the beginning of their journey. You never want to have an injury, and especially one that's as concerning as the one today seemed like it was. You want to make sure that they're okay and they have that opportunity to sort of continue doing the thing that they do best. Like, especially, you want to make sure that you can do what you can and really do your best work, apply the skills and things you've learned throughout the year, and really be able to sort of like push to make yourself an even better player. So I hope she's okay.
Yeah, so prayers up to Nika Mule, and we will keep you posted, especially as we have to do a Storm recap on Tempestade Talk. But of course, we're focused on the New York Liberty, as they are one of the 4 teams, Brian, still in the semifinals, and they are the only team that has 2 wins in the semifinals and have swept at least the first half of their home court advantage against the Las Vegas Aces, Brian. So I want to ask you just your overall thoughts about this game, but specifically thinking about how the Aces started the game and how Sabrina Ionescu finished the game.
So I was talking to someone about it during the game. You know how in a building there's a nervous energy when the home team is like too close for comfort against the team?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really get that on Tuesday night. It was so strange because I remember, we were there game 4 last year. Like, there was an unease in the air throughout the night, and then disaster struck.
Yes, I mean, I talk about it all the time on the podcast. I thought I was going to throw up. I really did. Like, that's how much it was palpable. So to your point, like, New Yorkers, we be knowing in these streets.
Mm-hmm. And during the Aces comeback in their regular season trip in Barclays, like once B got hurt, and then everything just felt weird. It's like, oh no, it's happening again. It's happening again. I didn't get that at all from the crowd on Tuesday night. It was okay. Like, Vegas started out strong, as they're supposed to. The Liberty settled in, and they were able to sort of like keep enough comfort. So when it got tied, it wasn't oh my God, it's over. It was okay, it's even. Let's go and take it. And you felt that. And I think to the other point with Sabrina, it's always a fun process watching a young player gradually put it all together. Like, you could sort of like watch the trajectory over time. You sort of see it builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And then we really saw it in that 4th quarter. Like, in our Slack, I kept texting key emojis at Erica every time Sabrina did something. I was like, this is it. This is it. We've been on it. And I think what makes it most impressive is that those baskets were going right downhill. And who were they over? The unanimous MVP runner-up DPOY. Like,
that's tough.
That's tough stuff. No, there was no back down in Sabrina's game. Like, I missed that free throw. I'm gonna make the next one. I get 2 more cracks at it. I got it this time. Don't worry about it. I'm good. So
Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Don't worry about it, sweetheart.
Yeah, like those free throws, they're cute. I like it. Let me keep at it. So you really just saw the entire like build and journey of Sabrina play out in that game, because it's okay. Yeah. Stewie's shot isn't there tonight. B, Sloot, and JJ are having to sort of battle it out on the other end. I'm a score. I got you covered. Like, I'm gonna get downhill, get to the paint. Like, whenever those driving lanes are there, no bailout floaters, because she spent like a month doing that. Like, it was the point where my friend Lucas was like, "Yo, why does she keeps doing it, and then she just needs to like stop. Like, it's terrible." So none of that. Just get to the basket, finish over traffic every time. You really saw her take it over down the stretch, and I think that, especially. I was thinking a lot, like, we've seen championship teams when they're down, it's okay, we're going to make this push. We're going to make this push right now, and we're going to win this game right now. Vegas did it. They did it. They got it all the way tied, 2 minutes to go. Usually, like Kayla Thornton was telling us last year, like the team might have like broken down at the end. Like that AC3 in the corner, that's a gut punch. Tied that game up. Oh my God. Like, that was a gut punch. Yep. What happens right next trip? Sabrina layup. That's 2. Like,
yep.
I think,
I was just gonna say, it's like it was a totally different type of poise, and you and I have talked about this throughout this season. On Gotta Get Up, we've talked about it throughout this season. We definitely, as you've already alluded to, talked about it last season. I love the game flow and the lead tracker, so I had to put it up here. But I mean, this doesn't happen last season.
Mm-hmm.
Where you see Vegas, and we're going to talk about the adjustments that both teams made. Vegas, they came out trying to, hit the bemba. Okay. For my Spanish speakers, or, anyone who grew up in a Latina household, I don't know if you ever got that, but if you messed around, Abuela hit you in the bemba, in the lip. Okay. And that's exactly what Vegas did. And that's exactly what they needed to do. And it was already early on in the game on the broadcast. I know you were there, but I was listening to the broadcast, and they were talking about, these lead changes. There were no lead changes in game 1.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, even that alone last year might have been enough. Not might have been, at least against the Aces in the playoffs, which was in the WNBA finals. That was enough, because everyone talks about game 4, but I mean, listen, I was at game 1. I watched game 2. Game 3 was, that was really the only one. And then, Becky Hammond's been talking a lot about game 4. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but I love that the Liberty were able to close out games. And this is something even this year, Brian, that they've had to learn how to do, because we talked about it before. It kind of is either they're up for 1 and 3 and down for 2 and 4, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Now they've been able to gut out those wins for the majority of those games, but being consistent in 2 back-to-back quarters has not always been what the Liberty has been able to do.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because at the beginning of the year, they were god-awful in second quarters. It got to the point where it'd be like, Sandy, why y'all so terrible in the second quarter? So she's like,
she pulled a cock hopper, right? I don't even know.
I don't know. And like, you gradually saw them start putting it together more and more throughout the year. Because like, one of their big things last year, and part of the reason why Stewie's minutes total was so high, was that they jump out to big leads, and then they just sort of like let it erode down the stretch. Like, they just gradually let teams back in, and it's like, oh, I like, time to put it back up to 10 and bring this home. Now they haven't had to do that as much. Like, they've been able to get those leads, hold serve, hold tough, and get the job done. And that's such a huge thing, especially in a compressed season. Like, if you're able to sneak those pockets of rest in, if you're able to sort of like have more comfortable wins, that's less stress on you, because a lot of the players have big time minutes coming up in Paris. So if you're able to manage that, and Sandy, to her credit, really did try to make a more concerted effort to like limit the usage of Stewie, like really managing her out a little bit more, so that way she's not having to sort of burn the midnight oil in July as she did last year. And I think,
Because we talked about that last year, and folks tried to come in the comments like we ain't know what we was talking about. We were like, hey, let's ask the question: should we rest Stewie? Then I mean, it's been more public now, but we also talked about last year whether it was Vandersloot, whether it was JJ, whether it was Stewie, just saying, listen, we keep hearing that folks don't know what's going on, things are hard. We knew a little bit about what Sloot was going through. We knew that JJ had the injury, and you were there, Brian, at exit interviews. I've talked about this on the podcast before. I was trying to get where Stewie's headspace was, because you just felt it's not something that she's not the type to, and most athletes aren't the type to, quote unquote, complain about things, but you could just feel that there was something that was not like an ailment, not like a physical ailment, but there was something just heavy about last season. And then, of course, now with some of not just the pregnancy, but with other things happening in her family that we now know about. And so, it's been a grind for this New York Liberty squad. And I love that the energy seems to be like no excuses. But I think another thing, Brian, we absolutely have to talk about, and we know you and I were sitting there for the exit interviews from Jonathan Kolb, Sandy Brondello, and all the way through. The New York Liberty talked about improving the bench, the athleticism, the backcourt athleticism. And when you look at this game, the Vegas Aces starters outscore the New York Liberty starters 74-67. How does New York gut out this win? They doubled the bench, doubles up the Aces bench.
There it is.
I mean, end of podcast. We'll see you next time. Like this is huge. And I've said it. I know Cheryl Swoops has said it, and I take this. I'll put this on my shoulders, because you've been trying to tell me. You've been like, Erica, like, I'm gonna need you to just like relax, look into Leo a little bit more. And I'll be like, no, bro, I don't understand. I'm an eye test person. I don't understand. No, I understand now. I understand fully. I understand fully and wholly, and I'm with it. I'm with it. We also have to mention that Leo started again. Great game, I think, for Courtney Vandersloot off the bench. And not just she was able to be to get buckets when needed to keep the flow of the offense going, but of course we know she's a great floor general. Or I be picking up some things. I was at a college media day, and I'm telling you, Courtney Williams ain't the only one who prefers to be called a lead guard. Okay, lead guard is the new thing. It's what the young folks is saying. So I love it. I mean, I think it's been great. Another thing I really want to talk to you about, Brian, is when we think about both teams, I think that this was a game of adjustments. Both teams were able to make adjustments, and that's why it came down to some of these stats, and we'll get into it. But let's start with Vegas. What was the most effective adjustment that you saw Vegas make from game 1 to game 2?
I think for them, they were able to get Asia a little bit more room to work with. Like the Liberty would still try to sort of double, and we'll get into like a problem that New York had in game 2 as compared to game 1. Like she was able to get a little bit more room, and she was able to sort of like have at least a little bit more operating space to work with. So I think that helped her a great deal. Like her fourth quarter, like I think she only missed like 2 shots, but like the 2 shots she missed, well, we'll get to that later, but she was really able to sort of like get the team on her back in a way that she wasn't able to in the first game. And I think just getting her a little bit more room. And I think also, which ties into the first point, which ties into that, Becky hit the AC button and it worked.
Hello.
Like it's so funny. Like in shoot around for game 2, Stewie said that they expected Vegas to start AC in game 1. So when Kia started, it was like, oh, okay, that works for us. And first play of the game, AC 3 points. Like AC that's the lineup they have to run with. And it's the championship lineup essentially. Like that's the one like you have a player who works incredibly hard and is a defensive savant. Like she studies her opponent. She does everything well on the defensive end. And you need a player like that. And especially someone who can give you a little bit of sort of like scoring punch to give the core 4 a little bit more room to work with. So starting AC, I think, was a brilliant bit by Becky. And I guess we'll get to a little bit later. I do have questions as to what they're going to look like in game 3.
Yeah, we're definitely going to preview that. But before we do that, let's talk about what worked for New York. Now, Leo, I mentioned Leo started. Now, Leo, and we talked about this. I made a comp between a former New York Liberty player, Leo, and Rebecca Allen. And I think we saw a little bit of the Rebecca Allen in Leo in game 2. What do I mean by that? Can be very solid defensively. I do think Leo is a better defender than Rebecca Allen. Rebecca Allen had to really work on her defense, but she has that length. Yeah. But what we see from both of them is because of their length, they can sometimes, I think, again, Allen used this a little bit more, and Leo can sometimes get caught using her arms more than shuffling her feet. I think she's got great footwork, but she doesn't always use it. She relies on her, her wingspan, so to speak. And that can get you in trouble. You get your hand caught in the cookie jar. And Leo, with a little bit of foul trouble, not able to. I think the biggest thing for the Aces is, sure, you get the Liberty into a little bit of foul trouble early, which we talked about in Slack. But another thing that I think was interesting is that it takes Leo out of her offensive rhythm.
Yeah, I think that, for Leo's such a perfectionist. She was like, man, she basically said that my defense wasn't good in game 1. And I'm like, Leo, like, you were good, Leo. Like, don't be so hard on yourself. Like, you were fine. She's like, oh, look, such a perfectionist. I'm going to go back, look at it, and then come back with a different statement. But, for game 2, like, Leo didn't have it. But after a point, it was like, oh, Kayla, you got some buckets? Go work. One of the, like, I'm sure on the TV, it sort of like jumped off because media row, like we're 115 and like we're like, we have like a beeline on the opposing bench. Katie gets in the corner. Plum has 2 fouls on her. Katie, 4 dribbles to the basket, uncontested layup. Becky, timeout. And then I'm not sure if it was that moment in particular. I know there were a couple moments with Becky where she was like, what the F are you doing? And you can read it clear as day. And I'm like, Becky, you're right. Because I don't know what you're doing. Like, for Kelsey,
what are you doing?
Like, you can't allow an uncontested layup in a championship level game. Like, better than that. Like, 2 fouls or not, like, you're not gonna like let that go, because that's just unacceptable, because you make yourself a target on the defensive end. And I think for the Liberty, they knew that, okay, she's got those fouls on her. Let's go make it rough on her. Let's go do that. And I think they were able to do that. Sloot in particular was really able to sort of like keep the offense humming. Like, and I think especially there was like in that 4th quarter when they started getting a little bit panicked, I think just collectively there was a sense of poise and calm about the team, because like there were like some bad possessions. Sabrina even said, yo, I took a terrible 3-pointer in that 4th quarter. And it was like, okay, settle down. Like, I watched back the comments. I watched back the game last night on NBA TV, and Lobo was saying, yo, they need to calm down. They need to like relax. And then they got it together, which I think is a huge sort of like testament to them as a collective, that they were able to not sort of like become even more frazzled than what they were in that 90-minute stretch.
Yeah, I think another thing when you mention that not just them overcoming whatever kind of little funk they were in late in the game, but early in the game, they had to overcome that they couldn't run the pace that they wanted. And a part of that was, and I think Becky Hammond said this, and I think they said it on the broadcast as well, part of that was because the Aces were making their shots.
Yep.
Okay. AC, to your point, you just mentioned it, AC got them started, and that's why you have a veteran like that. But I also said in Slack, that's why y'all got to join us on Slack. But I also said in Slack, Brian, I love the choice for the Aces to go with AC. And I do think that although she can be a two-way player, you don't always get peak AC on both sides of the ball. You are either going to get the shutdown defender who can give you a couple of buckets and make good choices offensively, or you are going to get someone who's popping shots in the corner and, someone who, again, has high IQ defensively, but is not necessarily the, Brinks security system. And I think that was something that the Aces, they definitely needed. I'm not saying it was a bad choice. I agree with you. That was the choice. It was the choice that the Liberty looked like they were prepared for. And it goes back to what we were talking about with the bench and a little bit more of the depth. There has to be other players that can step up. And I think it's interesting. I know a lot of people are up in arms about the fact that a injury that was not officially, or was not, there was not permission to be disclosed, has been disclosed. But I'll be honest, like, listen, I don't know the circumstances, and I understand why people are upset. I also think you just got to know. I'm saying this generally because I don't know the circumstances, but you tell a reporter, or a reporter finds out about an injury, you might not want them to know, but if they know, they know, baby. I don't know what you want to say. That being said, it does. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that does explain what we've been seeing from Jackie Young, though.
Yep. I want to stay on that. Like, that explains everything that's been wrong with Jackie for the past 2 months. Like, because I even wrote, I'm like, yo, she's shooting 31% in the mid-range post-Olympics. Like, I don't, like, the Monstars didn't take her powers when we weren't looking. Like, it had to be something. And if it's an injury, it's you've been hurt for 2 months. That explains it. And then it's, okay, I understand completely why you can't get anything going right now. I understand why you're allowing you're allowing uncontested layups to the basket in an 81-81 game with 2 minutes to go. Oof. I get it. And I guess there also, and to your other point, journalists, like, you're telling it's like, it's very much like the In Living Color bit where Kim Williams is like, you didn't hear that from me. Yes, you don't tell her things because she's gonna tell somebody else. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like, unless it's very explicit, which in fairness, we're both journalists, and we want to make sure we provide this context for people listening. Absolutely. If you are talking to, we'll just say, a subject, coach, player, whatever, other reporter, and they say, this is off the record, or this is on background. Now, something on background, just to clarify, I want to do a little education here. Something on background effectively means that they don't want what they're telling you attributed to them. So, like, you didn't hear it from me. Like, I knew you were saying that as a joke, but that's kind of effectively what on background is. Like, I ain't say it, but you know.
Yeah.
That's different than, don't tell nobody this. Like, we're going to have this conversation. A lot of times, some people will be like, well, why say anything off the record? I think because people feel that it gives a little bit more context that an interviewer might not have. For example, I did an interview. I was talking to someone, or I wrote a story, and we had a conversation after about the story. They wanted a little bit of clarification. And so they mentioned something to me that I did not know. And I said, okay, great. Didn't have that full context on the record. Are you willing to provide any further information? And they were like, we're going to stick with our statement, which is totally fine. So even though I have more context, that was to, that is not to be published. So just wanted to do that. I think it's important because, especially given what we're going to talk about in the fourth quarter, I think understanding the role and the nuances of journalism is extremely important and has become a hot button topic. So we want to root that. Okay, now's the time, Brian. Let's talk about what we want to see, or what we think we will see in Game 3. I think we all know what we want to see, but this is a game going to Vegas. So now this series will flip to the second in the doubleheader. Because Connecticut will now host the Minnesota Lynx. That is a tied series, and Minnesota went full knuck if you buck. And so I don't know. I mean, I ain't saying I'm mad at it. I'm gonna be honest, Brian. I didn't know Minnesota had that in them.
Hey, like, I watched the clip of Caleb McBride scoring a bucket, and then immediately, get out of here, Marina. What do you think?
After, like, pop her in the jaw, I was like, yo, not you pop her in the jaw and you join in her at the same time. That's tough.
In post game, I saw the clip of court. They asked her, hey, what was going on with you and Marina?
Yup. She said, this is what she said. This is what I said. That was hilarious.
Marina, oh god, I love Marina Mabry
So
such
much.
a heel. I love it so much. I think Court said Marina said you've only had 5 good games, relax. And then Court's like, hey, you can't handle pressure. I'm like, oh my god, I love it so much. And
Yo, hilarious.
as it happened, like I was watching, like the links are surprisingly spicy. Like I was
They
watching
are.
back the clip from the game against Seattle earlier when NECA and Fee were getting into it, and then
Oh yeah.
NECA's overheard, and I'm like, how about a little respect, Fee? And Fee's like, go that way.
See you.
I
Bye. They're like
love
hilarious. They're like, okay, we might be in a market where national media don't give us no shine. That's all right, because we're gonna come at you with something. So we're excited for that game. We're not gonna recap that series, at least not right now. Yo, I'm telling you, but like as you can see, yo, we think it's hilarious. We're not out here like, listen, come on, like, and even Court, see Willie, she said it like, come on, we're gonna be fine after this, but we out here trying to get to the finals. So like,
right now, Marina, you don't know ball. Have a seat on the bench.
Oh my gosh, hilarious. I'm just ready because Marina from Jersey, like that's basically our cousins. You feel me? And she's like one of them New Jersey people that we're gonna claim as tri-state. You know what I'm saying? Because some people you don't claim, Brian. Some people you don't claim. I mean, I don't know how you feel, so I'm gonna ask you, but I'm gonna claim Mabry as tri-state. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I give it to her. Like,
okay, cool.
Marina, yeah, she's one of us.
Yeah, we don't claim everybody. Like some CT people, but the majority, like, oh, like okay, cute. But some Jersey folk, like dirty Jerry's, yeah, we getting down with that. All right, let's now get back to this Liberty Aces. All right, I mean, since we're talking about it, I don't know that the spice level is gonna get to that series, at least not in a way that is going to be like just kind of fun and not over the top. Like, let's keep it funky. Let's keep it funky. There are a lot of storylines, including some that have been embraced inside both locker rooms. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. That I'd be a little like, oh, if it gets spicy like that. That being said, I do think we could get a knockdown, drag out game, and we already saw game 2 got really close. If I'm the Aces, I'm going to the body all day.
Yeah.
All day.
Yeah, I think for Vegas, I wonder what they're gonna do as far as like their lineup, because Kia, we have to keep an eye out for the injury report later tonight. She left that game with a concussion, and concussions are tricky. Don't know how it works. Sometimes it can be back in the day. Sometimes it can last you months. Like, who knows? So if we operate on the assumption that Kia's going to miss game 3, Vegas's bigs left are Asia, who's going to start, of course, and then the combination of Queen Egbo and Meg Gustafson. Becky in game 2, she's like, oh, Meg, Meg might get some run. 0 minutes. 0 minutes.
Becky she's a menace to society. Like listen, putting the Hamby stuff aside, I just want to be clear. She's a menace to society.
Becky, ball knower, A+ antics giver.
Oh, you nailed it. You nailed it. But yeah, that's interesting. I didn't see that cross my timeline about Kia Stokes. So that's tough. That being said, I mean, it's tough because we just talked about a potential injury. And I think it's fair to say, and people have already been critical of this, but could Becky have found more minutes for Meg in game 2, especially given that they did tighten up defensively? They were making more stops, and there's a little bit more you have to do on the defensive side when Megan Gustafson is in the game as opposed to Kia Stokes.
Yeah. Like, I feel like it's a situation where is the trade-off of Kia possibly being bad on pick and roll defense worth the room that she gives Asia Wilson on the inside against JJ and everyone else? I thought the answer was yes. Like, I think that, hey, because like it was so wild to me that even towards the end of the season, like Becky switched the lineup back to have Kia with the starting 5, and I was like, because I was looking it up following the Seattle series, so I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, it seemed like Meg was working in the starting 5. Like, you have like a spot up shooter from the corner, and the Liberty, as it happens, were over helping like crazy in game 2. So those corner threes were there for the taking. So
right. Yes, very much.
You didn't get anything. And, on the Queen Egbo tip, like, she played like 8. I think she played 18 minutes total as an ace and 15 in the game where everyone took the night off against to end the regular season against Dallas. So you're bringing in 2 bigs completely cold in a do or die game, and the pressure is all on. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough sledding. And
that's hella tough.
That's hella tough. And I think that especially, that your big four. Well, I guess we'll get to the minutes piece about some of the big four in a minute as well. Like I want to get to that because I'm very fascinated by the machinations of game 1 and game 2. Like now you need somebody to help out on the glass because they've been getting worked in the interior. Which
is wild, right? So yeah, it's wild. I'm trying to look at the stats now, but I mean the rebounding was much better for Vegas in game 2.
I have a wild stat for you. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Rebounds in this series: Sabrina Ionescu 13, A'ja Wilson 13.
Oh!
Yep.
That is wild to me. Well, and on the broadcast they talked about this a lot. And again, this is where I don't think Kiah Stokes helps. I've talked about this for her whole career. She was with New York for a while. I talked about it. Great on defensive rebounds. I don't know why she don't crash the glass on the offensive side. I keep saying it. If I had shoulders like that, I'd be knucking and bucking and ready to fight every day. So she's like, that's just got to happen. And that's a place where Vegas struggled, certainly in game 1. And that was critical in game 1 because they weren't making shots. So that's wild to me. And we know Sabrina Ionescu, the triple-double queen at Oregon, we know she can rebound, and she obviously is not, 6'8" or whatever. But
she's not approximately 1.
Oh my, Brian. Brian, well played, sir. Well played, sir. Oh my god, I couldn't even just keep rocking. I was like, I have to stop and appreciate that. Oh damn. Okay, she's not up there with the trees, She with the mid-size trees, borderline bushes, So on the fauna flora, but it's positioning and it's the long rebounds, and that's where New York was able to capitalize. They did not do that as much in game 2 because again the Aces were making their shots. AC gives you a completely different look. I think Chelsea Gray had pockets, and this is where you got to think. And I know they talked about this a little bit with some of the Aces content, but Chelsea Gray is still very much in rehab mode, trying to get to optimal level. And I don't think we've honestly seen it. But what's scary, especially with the Aces coming home, is that it's getting progressively better, noticeably better game by game for Chelsea Gray. So she's got to be an X factor for the Aces. But let's talk about it, Brian, because I want to wrap this up so we can talk a little bit about good game where Christine Brennan and Sarah Spain go toe-to-toe. I will say that I don't know that it was an enjoyable listen, but I appreciated the conversation. So I want to get into that. But let's do it this way, Brian. The New York Liberty win game 3, sweep the series, punch their ticket to the WNBA Finals if
they win game 3, if Sabrina goes for 22 and over. I think Sab has developed a level of comfort against this Aces team that we've never seen from her before. And I think that especially with Vegas and Jackie being less than 100%, like Jackie's going to have to devote so much energy trying to slow and chase Sabrina all around the court. And Sab has energy for days. So I think if Sab goes off, the Liberty win this game. And I think that Vegas is going to give you that run. But if the Liberty are able to sort of like withstand it like they always do, the gas tank is going to hit E.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. You know what I also just realized is that Niara Sabally did not play in game 2.
Yeah. Funny thing about that, like she had a rough stretch in game one, and then Sandy went with KB in that fourth quarter, and KB was excellent. And then KB had a rough game two, and then she got a little bit banged up. We'll have to see the injury report on her too, but she should be fine. Like, she looked okay after the game, so it'll be fun to see how Sandy uses. Like, hey, that's the beauty of having good options. Like, oh,
yes,
my rim rolling machine big is not really cooking tonight. Oh, here's my rangy forward who can get in the passing lane, drive to the basket, and do all these good things on both sides of the ball. Look at Jonathan Kolb. Goodbye, hybrid rebuild. Hello, bigger picture.
You know he hates when I ask that. I swear, if I get him, if I'm in town, which I'm hoping I will be for exit interviews, I'm starting right there. So where are we with that? He's gonna be like, Erica, get out. Get out. Oh my gosh. All right. I'll wrap us up in the third quarter. This is our preview of game 3. The New York Liberty, and this is why I wanted to look at the box score, because I agree with you. 22 plus for Sab, that's got to be automatic. I also think that you need to at least see Stewie and JJ where they were. With Stewie had 15, John Cole Jones had 14. Now, I would love more, but they have to maintain that. I think absolutely you have to maintain that. And like I mentioned, Sloot gave us 12 off the bench. I love that. You have to outscore Vegas on the bench. And that is why I wanted to really take a look at this, because I think in my estimation, between Benijah, Leo, and Niara can be an X factor here. Niara or Kennedy Burke, but I think Niara could be Niara or KT, to be honest, are probably the better offensive options. Both can obviously play on the defensive side as well. But as far as adding more points to the Liberty till, so to speak, I think those are probably your best bets. KT, we know she got that dog. And Niara's game is just fluid. It's so liquid smooth. And I really would love to see if and how she can impact this game. But you have to get at least another, 12 to 15 points between Lainey getting to double digits, Leo getting to double digits, and or KT and Niara, and any combination of that trio getting us to an extra 15 points, because I think aces are going to come back with something. So I think it's just really continuing. I guess I could have condensed that by saying the bench has to continue to and even surpass their output from game 2.
I like it. I think especially, Vegas is going to have, like, since they're smaller, they're going to have to put so much attention on JJ in the post. And JJ she's such a great passer. Like, she always knows how to make the right play. And whenever you try to bring extra attention to her, she's going to find the right person. Like, one of my favorite highlights of game 1 was JJ being doubled, and then she threw a corner pass to Leo at 100 miles an hour, right in her shooting pocket, 3 points going the other way. Just beautiful basketball. And JJ, in post game, she was like, man, I should have had more rebounds. I was like, man, I let some of them go. I'm like, because someone asked about the double-double. She was like, man, I should have had like 10 rebounds. I should have had more than 10. So look for JJ to be more dialed in, and with a chance to go to the championship round. JJ is always dialed up, and she mentioned, like, she mentioned to us after game 1, she didn't like how she played in the first game against the Dream. So she was like, okay, I'm going to be more determined. I'm going to make sure I walk away feeling a lot better about my game. And then you saw her in game 2. You saw the work she did in game 1. You saw her battle it out in game 2 last game. So JJ, she's, as the moment continues to rise, JJ rises with it, and she's able to really sort of hold it down, because JJ, she's got the toughest matchup in basketball right now. And she's been holding it down. Like, it's a whole team effort, and she's leading the way when it comes to that. So
she's that first body. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be good. I think the New York Liberty can absolutely sweep this series. It is going to take, just as we've seen both teams, quite honestly, they're going to have to level it up, because you can't assume, you never should. But I mean, and this is why, with all Becky's comments and stuff, we didn't get into it too much on this podcast. But listen, we got rope-a-dope last year when they were like, oh no, no Kia, no Chelsea.
Yeah.
I guess.
And why is Kayla George shooting? Oh God, she made a 3 again.
Yeah, like they were like, no, we're not fitting. No, we're not going nowhere else. It ends tonight. And that's what the New York Liberty have to have. And I think they're capable of that mentality where that edge was missing a little bit. But anyway, all right. We are going to talk about Good Game, which now for those of you who listen to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, you know, first of all, Misha Jones is one of the producers on Good Game with Sarah Spain. And you also know that this is not my wording. And I just learned when I joined Good Game that apparently I am in a throuple, a podcast throuple, Brian, with Misha Jones and Sarah Spain, which, I mean, if you're going to be in a throuple, a podcast throuple, I feel like that's pretty solid. So, I mean, and I feel like, you know, you are an extension of all of that. You were not on Good Game, but like all of us, we are all family. That is a very weird way of saying we are all family. So we're always going to support fam. And Sarah Spain brought on Christine Brennan. Now, if you are in the Black Rosie Media Slack, you know that she has been a subject of a few posts that, you know, and she's writing a book on Caitlin Clark. I know of her work. I've appreciated her work over the years, and I just have not really resonated with a lot of what she's been saying in the women's basketball space, Brian. So at first, I'm not even gonna lie. When I saw A Good Game with Sarah Spain featuring Christine Brennan, I was like, I ain't listening to that. I was like, this is getting the Vegas Aces documentary treatment. No, thank you. I ain't watching that. I ain't listening to that. Then I was like, you know what? I know, and I trust Sarah's work. Obviously, we know Misha and Alex, as he is the other producer, but we know Misha here. And let's see what they had cooking. And at the time of recording this, you and I have gotten the majority of the way through independently our podcast listen. So I'm going to come to you, Brian. Your initial thoughts about what you heard, not what you thought, because I already kind of gave what I thought, but I want to know what you heard from the interview in where you are with Sarah Spain's conversation with Christine Brennan.
Yeah, so I'm about like halfway through. So for folks watching at home, the pod I think runs about an hour 34, and it's a break from Sarah's usual format. So this is just like straight interview, which is new for them in that way. So far it's sort of Christine giving a little bit of background as to like where she's been in the sports landscape, her journey from the bad old days of the 1980s and all the hell she had to put up with then, to sort of like seeing her work she's done as far as like her locking in on like particular athletes. Like she mentioned Tiger, like doing stories about Tiger. And then it got to, I would say, a lot of inside baseball for like us media folks, as far as like, okay, the difference between reporting story, column, op-ed, that kind of thing, what your lens is like, what your focus is on, the book proposal that she got, how that came to be, all of that, like even some of her coverage back in like, I guess sort of like her not catching the Caitlin phenomenon, if you will, but like watching Clark's ascent to supernova, in a sense, watching it as a fan and then covering it as a journalist, that kind of thing. Like the whole thing with the Final Four and like, you know, Stewie being like four-time national champion Brianna Stewart saying, if you don't get like me, you are not an all-time great, and now you're not the greatest in that sense. So stuff like that. And then also got to, I would say, the nuts and bolts of the thing that has everyone really hot, which was the scrum interview with Dejanay Carrington at shoot around, like not knowing what getting through to the dome wrong, that kind of thing. So I think that so far it's a back and forth, but I would say a healthy back and forth. I feel like with the questioning we've seen so far from Sarah and in the parts I've listened to, it's not adversarial, because I feel like it's not a situation where she's like, oh, Christine, you are insert here. It's okay, walk me through this, and then follow-ups at that. So it's a healthy back and forth, and I think a good one in that. And I feel, especially for Christine, like in my part so far, I'm walking away with a little bit more understanding of where she's trying to land the plane, if that makes sense. Because I feel as if it's like, my thing is that, okay, here's what I'm trying to do. These are the norms that I've done and used before, and it hasn't created sort of a problem, if you will, at least as far as I've seen it. So I can sort of like, I can almost sort of see her taking me behind the curtain in a sense, and
Yeah,
I feel like that informs a lot of how I've seen her coverage in a sense, where it's like, okay, here's how I did it in this space. Here's how I did it with this singular figure who is so like who's really like on fire in a sense. Not to make Caitlin Clark 1997 Tiger Woods, but like you sort of see, okay, here's the figure. This person is really hot right now.
right,
All my work is centering on the moment, if you will. Like
right.
this is the person. This is the lead story. My work is going to center on that. And then she sort of mentioned that even when she was covering Tiger, then a lot of the other golfers didn't sort of like get coverage in that regard. And I think Sarah, she was able to sort of like connect the dot in the sense of for the players now. If you're doing the stories on this particular person, are you unintentionally sort of like casting shade on everyone else in the sense of like, oh, frosty reception? It's kind of you're almost like leading into it with the Dishane question. Oh, were you laughing at this? Like you're leading her into it,
Right.
and it's a situation where it's like, I guess I'll talk about myself for a quick second. Like my day job is talking to people in various parts of their life, like figuring out, okay, you're in this mood, you're in that mood. Sometimes it goes well. Like other times, like I'll talk to someone, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna put this application in for interview, and they blow me off. Like it happens. Like so you got to know how you present, how factors beyond your control influence how you ask questions, what you ask, how you work it, and the responses you get. And then it's up to you to sort of figure out, okay, it's not maybe something I'm doing. I have to think about it. But if the sort of like general consensus is, oh, that's kind of how you approach it is kind of whack. Like I ain't like it.
Right.
It's not a indictment of you as a person and a journalist. It's like, yo, what you did was what you did, we think is really whack. And even if the PA is pissed off, like unions and bosses never, well, Brent's not a boss of them, but I feel like you know what I mean. Like someone who's getting in the way of like what they want is going to be someone that gets sort of like get a nice little push, if you will. So that part feels like it's sort of like part of the game in that regard, because like it's a member who had their who's had their sort of like day and sort of like things going on at the time made more hectic and annoying because this bad question set them up to get pilloried over the internet for something that's really within the flow of basketball, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I feel like the back and forth of it is really good so far. And in the back 45 I have left, I want to sort of see a little bit more as to how she's sort of like processing this moment, like I guess the sort of like general feel of everything when it comes to coverage, not just with her individually, outlets at the Olympics, because you were at the Olympics and you covered everything. Like you were there you were there doing it independent, and you
Right.
was able to make a shake versus these outlets with huge resources and huge
Right.
dollars behind them. Why
Talk about it.
yeah, why like how is it that Erica can handle all that, do everything front to back, and y'all with y'all money and all that resources, money, manpower, resources, cachet, reach, whatever. How is it y'all not there? And how is it
Right.
you as a basketball columnist, not a basketball columnist, but like you as a figure of national repute, how are
Right.
you putting a story together about and like USA women's basketball is the most successful institution in American sports these days. Like I don't think they've lost a game since the George H.W. Bush administration. A long time.
And I mean, she talks about that. She also says things that I find endlessly frustrating, just in general, but also things like, you know, I am talking about XYZ. No one else is talking about XYZ. And those things alone, when you're in a conversation trying to express clarification, and first of all, thank you. And I appreciate what you said regarding independent or, emerging media like Black Rosie Media, who was there Christine Brennan was there for 2 games in the Olympics. I was there for all the games, and so except for one. But I think that it was a lot of name dropping. It was a lot of taking us back to several decades. It was a lot of, I'm the only one, which I can hold space for saying things in a quote unquote more casual conversation that are a little bit hyperbolic, right? That being said, when a part of the conversation circling and surrounding your coverage of women's basketball is that it lacks at minimum nuance, and at the most egregious level that it is harmful, I don't know that I'm the only one in the world. Like it was giving former Republican president vibes.
Yeah, I am the only one. Yeah, and it's like,
right. It's like no one knows more than me, XYZ. When Sarah Spain, I think, did a really great job saying, okay, Christine, you know that I know this. And, at times then she would say, well, for your listeners, for your viewers, whatever the case is. And she's really trying to establish herself. I felt like it was very much these are my credentials. And I get that. I understand why you would want to do that in that kind of interview. And for me, Sarah asked I saw someone on social media say very generous, very thoughtful, and very straightforward, clarifying questions. And at least from what I've heard so far, I think I have another 20 minutes or so to go before we stop to record Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, hosted by Black Rosie Media, which, yes, is independent. Make sure you subscribe. Help us on Super Chats when we do go live again. All of these things help to keep the work that we do going. And it just seemed like she missed opportunities to really listen thoughtfully and answer thoughtfully the questions that Sarah was asking, as opposed to doing, quite honestly, exactly what she did to Dejanay Carrington and responding to the reaction instead of to the direct question that Sarah Spain was asking. So I think, I'm grateful that I listened to it. I'm grateful that Sarah, and again, Alex and Misha as her producers, and whoever else was involved. I don't want to miss anyone. I'm not, it's on my podcast, so I don't know. I want to just give, I almost said a hockey thing. I'll say it now. Stick taps, give some daps to everyone that was involved, because for me, it was a difficult and frustrating conversation to listen to. And I think and we talked a little bit about, I love that you mentioned Inside Baseball, because I wanted to make sure we anchored some of the things that we were saying in, okay, let's step back. Let's explain this a little bit, because I just think that there are so many conversations that are happening on social media, including with journalists. Now, if you want to say big J journalists, content creators, influencers, I mean, journalism, it's a wild, wild west right now. And I think we all understand that. And there are certain outlets, and Christine Brennan is from those outlets and reminded us a few times on the podcast that she's from those outlets. Also, if you listen to the podcast, I will offer more context for this later for any of our viewers. But shout out to Doug Feinberg, who I actually saw here in Illinois at Big Ten Media Day. So
wait, I seen Doug on Tuesday. He flying Doug flying to Vegas from Illinois, man. Doug,
see what I'm saying? So, and I didn't even know you just saw Doug. We didn't plan this. I just wanted to give a shout out to Doug Feinberg. And again, I can provide context later, because they about to kick me out this hotel room, y'all. But anyway, I'd be like, listen, I'm gonna go when I'm ready. I'm gonna go when I'm ready. And I am telling you, I'm not going. Anyway, okay. But I think that Christine Brennan was a little bit on the defensive, and it felt to me like, because she was on the defensive and trying a little bit, I will say, I don't want to put my thoughts on her. I will say, in my estimation, her goal was to stand 10 toes down. And I understand that, I'm 10 toes down on some of the things I say. And you can be 10 toes down on your opinion and still be open to what what other people are offering. And there were times where I think Christine didn't do that. There were other times where I think maybe she was a little bit more malleable to that idea, but then maybe got a little sidetracked because what she sometimes was doing was saying, okay, Sarah, you threw a lot out here. Let me break these things down. And she would focus on, in my estimation, like the least relevant thing and then not come to the main thing. But, you know, I don't know. I guess all that to say, I know, Brian, you have a thought. I mean, I would say people should listen for sure. And I would love to, especially if we can get Misha on, to dive deeper. But I wanted to, because we're not live, so we don't have our listener questions segment. But I do think folks should check it out, Brian.
Yeah, like that's a great point. And to the defense, I guess I have to have two thoughts, like, because I know we're pressed for time, so I'll just stick with one. And I guess in the future, we'll circle back to it. Something that they mentioned, I think Christine mentioned in particular, is that Twitter being a particular cesspool. And I feel like a lot of, at least from my vantage point, a lot of like W coverage has centered around like Twitter reactions. And it's like, why, like, that's the thing, like, I think this is where like everyone getting off of social media and deprioritizing it is really going to come into play more, especially with like sports leagues and social media being like worse than what it was 10 years ago and even 2 years ago, for example. Like, can we get to a space where we're not reacting to the thing online and instead sort of like putting the focus on the thing that we're actually investing real resources in, as far as like time, presence, eyeballs, funds, money, things like that? How do we sort of like get to a point where we de-emphasize, this right-wing outlet is asking Dawn Staley nonsense questions looking to cause trouble at the Final Four, versus okay, look at what Nafisa Collier is doing. How is he able to get here?
Yeah, and Christine tried to get there, and I think it was one of those points that she made that I think was a salient point, but it came across to me as, instead of a standalone, good, solid point to make, it was used, in my estimation, in the conversation as a defensive point that was not quite on target to what she was at.
Yeah, because it was like, oh, this is a cesspool. People are talking about this thing. I have to ask a question. It's like, okay, cesspool, got it. I'm with you. Ask about the thing that happened. Okay, I get it. Like, it's a play that happens. Like, we've asked, like, I've been in rooms where we've asked about flagrant fouls before. It's not.
Yeah.
And then it's the lead in, oh, were you laughing at this thing? And it's like,
correct.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, but wait, like, and Sarah multiple times, because there was a little back and forth, and this is early in the podcast that they talk about Dejanay Carrington. She was like, okay, but like, you know, she answered the first part of the question, and then the second part of the question still made the assumption that it was intentional, even after she said it wasn't. And Christine Brennan, I think, was trying to find language to say, okay, well, you know, I maybe, and you can hear that I was having a difficult time collecting my words. Now, Brian, who among us who's ever had a microphone or a phone in their hand, right, has not had difficulty framing a question, right? That's very real. That's very natural. And what we also then hear multiple times on the podcast is that she has been in the game for a minute. So you would hope, and this is me saying this, Sarah didn't say this, but I'm gonna say it, you know, with that level of expertise, one would hope that she could craft that question, even if it is on the spot in real time, with a little bit more finesse. And I think, again, Sarah multiple times found ways to get to that question. And I would have to listen again to that part. But sitting here right now, almost completely through my first listen, I don't feel that I got that. And that was a little tough because it was the conversation off the hop. And for me, at least as a listener, I will be honest about this, and I'm open to listening to it again. But it set the cadence and the precedent of how I'm framing the conversation moving forward. And to the credit of both of them, because these are people who've worked alongside each other, I do think there was an amount of mutual respect. And I think that there was a lot of care while also holding each other to task. Quite honestly, each other. And I say that because Christine Brennan pushed back on some things, you know, and I there were some that I didn't think were fair. There were others where I was like, I could see where she's coming from with this. So I think it's a worthwhile listen. And of course, we're always going to tell you to support a good friend of this podcast, Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, Misha Jones, who is the producer, one of the producers of Good Game by Sarah Spain. Of course, we pre-recorded this. We usually are going live. So we will have the link to Good Game with Sarah Spain and the episode that we're talking about. But Brian, you and I are going to be locked in tomorrow with everybody else. I was going to make a joke, but we're not going to do that today. Minus all them, Caitlin Clark followers. I'll cut that out, but I just had to say it. Anyway, we will be locked in. We saw that the numbers for this particular series have been really great as far as viewership. I can only imagine that it will be a very lively crowd in Las Vegas. Listen, it's the two-time defending champs with their backs against the wall on home court. It's going to be, like I said, knock down, drag it out. And I'm here for it.
So, all right. I know they do this in the fourth quarter, but with everything on the line and considering there may not be a tomorrow in Las Vegas, do you think they do miss twice, get a slice in the first quarter?
Wow. Brian, you are on one, and I'm here for it because you know what? This is a podcast for New York Liberty fans, so we gonna talk our talk. And best believe, I can't speak for what the New York Liberty have posterized, but I there are some things that I know listeners know. I just burn my dang grits, and I mean I'm a New Yorker. I grew up a New York Liberty fan. I don't shy away from that, but we also. It's all love at the end of the day. Like we gonna chirp on the Aces, abso-freaking-lutely, and they chirp on us too. It's all gravy. It's all good in the hood. Multiple things can be true. We are not going to begrudge anyone long term. No, we're not going to begrudge anyone as human beings, as hoopers, especially when they start popping off at the gums about talking about they don't love each other. Like, yeah, we're gonna have some things to say. And that's going to be cool. And this is a great rivalry. This is exactly what Cathy Engelbert, concocted in the Petri dish in 2019. So here we go.
I have a question.
What's up?
After this series, do you think Cathy's going to book herself another spot on the CNBC Power Hour?
Oh my gosh, please don't. Cathy, please. Like she got to lay low. Just lay low. Lay low. Lay low. Lay low, just like you did when we were asking for clarification on the charter flight system. Just do that.
We haven't another inside baseball thing for the people. Last year, Cathy did a tour of every media market and did convos with journalists covering every team in 2023, 2024.
Crickets.
Cathy, I haven't seen her. She was at the Commissioner's Cup, and ain't none of us know. She just popped in, did her little interview.
She said Jumbo. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. But the W's gonna have to figure some things out. But we are hoping that if the New York Liberty are able to continue on past the semifinals, that we will have coverage on the ground for Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. But of course, we got to see what happens in Game 3 first. So for Brian Fleurantin and of course Misha Jones and our throuple partner Sarah Spain, podcast throuple. Let's keep it. Yeah, I'm not trying to get nobody in trouble with whoever. It's just podcast, okay?
When we say relationships, we mean friends, people.
Come on, all right? Because I don't want nobody clipping this. But also, what we are going to do is the full raw edit of this, or it's not edited at all. The raw video of this recording will be available for those of you on and in our Slack community. So you get all the jokes. You're going to get all the jokes. Everybody else, we might be a little more demure. We're going to be a little more demure. We're going to be a little more cute. Might, because I'm messy. But thank you so much, Erica L. Ayala, on behalf of our Black Rosie media crew, signing out. And there's this new thing now, Brian. I don't know how it works, but they have an outro button for us now, so we don't have to do
more wave.
No more wave. No more wave. Even though that Ellie wave was popping. We don't Ellie wave no more. I mean, we can still do it, but there's like an outro now. Now, do I know how it works? Absolutely not. So I'm still gonna hit this other button, but we're gonna Ellie wave. We're gonna Ellie wave out to our end credits. Oh, it does. Hold on. Play outro and end recording.